Oh, left. Oh, it's closed. Welcome home, all. It is Monday, and today is President's Day 2020. I was off into the weekend, so we're doing a little special for the President's Day on this Monday. And most of you should have had a holiday or had some time off, and hopefully, did some cool stuff. You got a 3-day weekend. That's always a plus, right? That's a good thing. So it is Monday, the President's Day, and kind of, again, a 3-day weekend that everybody just likes to take advantage of. I'm doing quite literally a special, a show tonight because I kind of want to draw focus to like an taken for granted, holiday. It's not just another holiday. It's the day we get to celebrate, or should be celebrating anyway, the presidents, generically, and in my case, for this particular show, in specific. And so specifically, when I'm talking about, what I'd like to consider, the big two, George Washington and then Abraham Lincoln, first and 16th president, respectively, at their different times. So, you guys know, most of you, that I'm a former U.S. history teacher, raised and brought up on, everything America, everything United States, and all the benefits and the good things about it. So I quite literally wanted to give you guys just, this one's going to be a quick show, not too much, but I want to give you a quick nuts and bolts breakdown of what the day is, and then I'm going to give you my particular perspective on the importance of the two gentlemen that I've just mentioned, in particular, Washington and Lincoln, and why I believe, they're the two gold standards when it comes to the presidency itself and the presidents in general as a whole, all 45 of them. So that's my perspective to you as a former history teacher. And so for you guys that are younger, an educational experience, learning experience, and for those of you guys that are older, my age or around there, younger or older, it's also a reaffirmation, a confirmation of a lot of the good that you should have been taught in school, if not high school, then even earlier, all the way down into elementary, and things that you should have learned and known about, the guy who chopped down the cherry tree, etc. So all good stuff. So it'll be a quick, incisive, factual, material-based treatment of President's Day 2020, and then I give you my little spin on what I think, who they are, what they are, and the value of them, for the last 243 years going forward into our 244th, as a country after our revolt, our revolution, our rebellion, and our formation of this little experiment we call the United States. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get real goony with you, but I'm going to read you the specifics. This was one of the best treatments of all the stuff that I saw over the weekend as I was digging through material. You can get a lot, and then it's just a jumble, and then you can just do the the meat and potatoes, the day, and it's something that you can internalize. But I want you to keep it, and then you remember it, so that you'll know a little bit more about history. This is our history, the United States history, and I quite literally am flabbergasted every day at the lack of historic knowledge that we have as a populace. Joe and Jane America walking the street just do not understand some simple, basic facts about the foundation of our country and the people that have served it in the office of the presidency and a variety of other ways. You'd be amazed at how many people just do not know our history. And again, shatters and staggers me, but I'll do my little piece here tonight to give you a little bit on, again, what I feel is an unappreciated, if underserved holiday, national holiday for the United States. It's an important one to me. So February 14th, October, let's see, President's Day 2020. The best treatment of this is on History, the History Channel. Go check that out. This is where I got this little piece. Like I said, I tried a bunch of different ones, but this one's one it's about a few minutes read, handful of minutes, 5-10 minutes at most. Really, really informative, instructive, and it'll give you the nuts and bolts about the holiday itself and the formation of it and the setting of the form of the holiday today. Okay. President's Day, federal holiday, celebrated on the third Monday in February. President's Day 2020 occurs on Monday today, February 17th. Originally established in 1885 in recognition of George Washington. The holiday became popularly known as President's Day after it was moved as part of 71's Uniform Monday Holiday Act. So, pay attention to here. This is how it formed, right? So, again, it was originally set up third Monday in February as George Washington, in recognition of George Washington. This was in 1885, so not quite 100 years later. The intent was to draw focus on the importance of the first president and his impact on the formation of our country, and quite literally the importance of him in particular about how this country was founded and how it started and how it went forward and why we still have it today. So it moved, President's Day, it was moved as part of 1971's. So here again, not quite another 100 years later, 71's Uniform Monday Holiday Act. It was an attempt to create more three-day weekends for the nation's workers. Not a bad thing, right? If you're in Germany, you got a lot of three-day weekends. And I know that because I spent a little time there. While several states still, so this is all current, while several states still have individual holidays honoring the birthdays of both Washington and Lincoln and others, President's Day is now popularly viewed, that's us, as a day to celebrate all U.S. presidents, past and present. Okay, Washington's birthday. The story of President's Day begins in 1800, following the death of George Washington in 1799. Some of you guys don't know that, didn't know that. Washington died in 1799, before the turn of the new century. 1799, February 22nd, birthday became a perennial day of remembrance. So this goes back to 1799. At the time, Washington was venerated as the most important figure in American history, rightly so. And events like the 1832 centennial of his birth and the start of construction of the Washington Monument in 1848. There you go. It's construction of the Washington Monument, 1848. That's how long it's been around. Washington's birthday was unofficial observance for most of the 1800s, and again, unofficial. It was kind of understood, if you were American, that you respected the man for the things that he did in bringing us our freedom in our country. It was not until late 1870s it became a federal holiday. So here's the guy. Senator Stephen Wallace Dorsey of Arkansas was the first to propose the measure, and in 1879, President Rutherford B. Hayes signed it into law. The holiday initially only applied to the District of Columbia, but in 1885 it was expanded to the whole country. At the time, Washington's birthday joined 4 other nationally recognized federal bank holidays: Christmas, New Year's Day, 4th of July, and Thanksgiving. So that's all you had back then. We have a lot more holidays now, but that's all they really had at that time, 100 plus years ago. Christmas, New Year's Day, 4th of July, and Thanksgiving. And it was the first to celebrate the life of an individual American of any kind. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, signed into law in 1983, wrong day, wrong century. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, signed into law 1983, was the second. So Washington's was the only holiday respecting and acknowledging of an individual American, an individual. Everybody got that, okay? And then Martin Luther King Jr. holiday was only the second. So those were the only two we had up until that point, and that was into 1983. That was the second. Okay, so the Uniform Monday Holiday Act. The shift from Washington's birthday to President's Day began in the late 1960s. Congress passed or proposed a measure known as the Uniform Monday Holiday Act. I kind of am a little green or in the weeds about this. I didn't know all these particulars, and that was kind of cool to refresh because I'm not a historian of holidays. One cool sidebar. Just because you know history or some history doesn't mean you know all history. So whereas I would say moderately proficient, there are plenty others that are better in some ancient and ancient Near East, military history, U.S. history in particular because of what I did for an avocation, a job. I do know those areas, but I'd be the first to say I do not know everything. And that's a good model to live by. Acknowledge that you don't know everything. Don't sound like you think you know everything. And you may not actually insert foot into mouth. So I did learn a little bit in researching this particular, I didn't know as much about the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, and this was kind of cool. So Senator Robert McClory of Illinois, the law sought to shift the celebration of several federal holidays from specific dates to a series of predetermined Mondays. They were trying to make it, again, to where workers had more three-day weekends, and that's not a bad thing. So they were packaging. The proposed change was seen by many as a novel way to create more three-day weekends for the nation's workers, and it was believed that ensuring holidays always fell on the same weekday would would reduce employee absenteeism. While some argued that shifting holidays from their original dates would cheapen their meaning, the bill also had widespread support from both the private sector and labor unions, and was seen as a surefire way to bolster retail sales. So you see how there's always ulterior motive. Look good, put something together so the people are happy, but we're trying to increase retail sales. We're trying to, help a labor union or the average nation's worker. And again, not bad, but they were trying to package and put these things together to get more than one benefit out of the simple. Like, hey, if we give these guys a three-day weekend, America, then maybe they will do things like go out and celebrate, party, have a good time, do a park, go to the lake, etc. And that increases or generates revenue in business, in an economy. Get people moving, actively doing things, and you will help increase economy. So the Uniform Monday Holiday Act also included a provision to combine the celebration of Washington's birthday and that of Abraham Lincoln. And that's why most people, the average American, when you conceive of President's Day, you don't generally think of all 45 presidents. You generally think of Washington and Lincoln. This is kind of the genesis of that. Remember, it started as a Washington in particular thing. And then over time, it became a little bit more than that and branched to become something where we're at now in this particular reading is Washington and Lincoln. So birthday with that of Abraham Lincoln, which fell on February 12th. Lincoln's birthday had long been a state holiday in places like Illinois, and many supported joining the 2 days as a way of giving equal recognition to two of America's most famous, if not best, statesmen and presidents. McClory was among the measure's major proponents, and he even floated the idea of renaming the holiday President's Day. So it came directly from this Senator McClory of Illinois. This proved to be a point of contention for lawmakers from George Washington's home state of Virginia, and the proposal was eventually dropped. A little bit of shade, right? They're trying to hey, that's all us. So nevertheless, the main piece of the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, passed in '68, officially took effect in 1971 following an executive order from President Richard Milhous Nixon. Washington's birthday was then shifted from the fixed date of February 22nd to the third Monday of February. So some of you will see that the date of his actual birth and the date of the holiday are not the same. That's why. So where was I? Okay, so Columbus Day, Memorial Day, and Veterans Day were also moved from their traditionally designated dates as a result of widespread criticism. In 1980, Veterans Day was returned to its original November 11th date, which I kind of like, being a vet. Okay, so here's an interesting did you know. Did you know President's Day never falls on the actual birthday of any American president? That's kind of funny. So 4 chief executives, George Washington, William Henry Harrison, Abraham Lincoln, and Ronald Reagan, were born in February, but their birthdays all came too early or late to coincide with President's Day, which is always celebrated on the third Monday of the month. So in effect, President's Day, the holiday, never lands on any presidents of the 45. No president's birthday, actual birthday, will ever land on President's Day itself. It became more for the mass. Okay, so what presidents do we celebrate? And this is the traditional question. What presidents do we celebrate on President's Day? Well, Nixon's order plainly called the newly placed holiday Washington's birthday was not long before the shift to President's Day began. The move away from February 22nd led many to believe that the new date was intended to honor both Washington and Lincoln, as it now fell between their 2 birthdays. It was, uniquely interspersed between the 2 birthdays of the great presidents, Lincoln and Washington. It was in between. Marketers soon jumped at the opportunity to play up the 3-day weekend with sales, and President's Day bargains were advertised at stores around the country. There are President's Day sales going on right now, and I may jump in on some myself. Good deals, and that's how they played it up. It'll, again, good for the economy. So by the mid-'80s, Washington's birthday was known to many Americans as President's Day. The shift had solidified in the early 2000s, now we're getting closer to our time, by which time as many as half the 50 states had changed the holiday's name to President's Day on their calendar. Some states have even chosen to customize the holiday by adding new figures to the celebration. Check this out. Arkansas celebrates Washington as well as civil rights activist Daisy Gatson Bates. I didn't know that. Alabama, meanwhile, uses President's Day to commemorate Washington and Thomas Jefferson, who was born in April. That's Alabama. Not bad. You'd think Virginia would do that since Jefferson's Virginia. Washington and Lincoln still remain the two most recognized, but President's Day is now popularly seen as a day to recognize lives and achievements of all America's chief executives. Some lawmakers have accepted this view, and I'm kind of partial myself there. You know, it's generically the 45, but I'm going to get into their little reading right now. But this is where I'm at with it. Is like, I don't want to celebrate all 45. I want to celebrate the best of the 45. That's just me being hard-headed, but that's my perspective and view. So some lawmakers have objected to this view, arguing that grouping, and this is my point, grouping Washington and Lincoln together with, and their wording is, less successful presidents minimizes their legacy. I'll just say it flat out. I don't want Washington and Lincoln grouped with some yahoos that happen to be president because they got a vote. Hell no, I don't want that. And again, I'm being hard-headed, old military, old history teacher, but you can't tell me that Washington and Lincoln stand head and shoulders above just about all of them. There are some other good presidents, don't get me wrong. There have been good presidents. But to me, Washington and Lincoln are still the gold standard. If you really, really understand your history, your U.S. history, and you get into the weeds about what these men, the 45 of them, have done, there is very little comparison, which I'll get to in a second as I finish this piece of the reading, and then I give you my piece before we head out. I told you, it's going to be quick tonight. Nuts and bolts, factual information, a quick little epilogue on my end, and then we're off for tonight as I move off to do some other things for the week. Congressional measures to restore Washington and Lincoln's individual birthdays were proposed, check this out, during the early 2000s, but all failed to gain much attention. For its part, the federal government has held fast to the original incarnation of the holiday as a celebration of the country's first president. The third Monday in February is still listed on official calendars as Washington's birthday. It's kind of listed like that on mine too. So what is closed on President's Day today? Nuts and bolts, factual information. As a federal holiday, many banks and schools are closed in observance of President's Day. The New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ are closed for trading on President's Day. The post office is not open, and non-essential federal workers have the day off. So, I mean, there's some caveats there. It says non-essential, right? It also says Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, holidays, many banks and schools. Notice the caveat, the warning, many banks and schools, not all. Depends. Depends on that particular school's charter, the bank, etc. So lastly, President's Day celebrations and traditions. Like Independence Day, President's Day is traditionally viewed as a time of patriotic celebration and remembrance. In its original incarnation as Washington's birthday, the holiday gained special meaning during the difficulties of the Great Depression. For obvious reasons, I would think you understand that. When portraits of Washington often graced the front pages of newspapers and magazines every February 22nd. 1932, the date was used to reinstate, and this is really near and dear to my heart. I really got a lot of family that have earned these things. In 1932, the date was used to reinstate the Purple Heart. Factual information for you guys that don't know this. A military decoration, the Purple Heart, originally created by my dog, George Washington, to honor soldiers killed or wounded while serving in the armed forces. So some people don't even know. Okay, you do know what the Purple Heart means, like in general. It is an award, a medal given to those serving in armed combat that have been wounded or killed in action. Okay, and there are criteria. I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but there are criteria to earn a Purple Heart. But in general, it's people that have died or been wounded in combat while in armed service to the United States. And again, it was created by George Washington, the very first, our great general, and the very first president. So I really like that stat, something you guys need to know. If you know about the Purple Heart, you know why, but you need to know who created it. It was George Washington. Why? Because George Washington had been wounded, been nearly killed a bunch of times in his time as a military man, and right up until his service as our nation's first general, first commander-in-chief, really. And this was even before he was president, because he was a commander in chief as the head of our revolutionary force. And so out of all that, after a lifetime of living service, after a lifetime of combat and serving in the military, first with, obviously, as a British, what are we looking for? A British commander, because he was British before. Then as an American, specifically, he was no longer general, but he had served his entire life in one form or another, first for the British and then ultimately as our nation's founder in terms of presidency. He is it. You know, he's the gold standard. We'll get to that in a second, but I want you to remember, lock it in. I'm going to reiterate, George Washington created the Purple Heart, our nation, one of our nation's oldest and I would say most important medals awarded, because it goes to people that have given and nearly died or did die for this country. That's important to me, because we have a lot of people running around that do things. They would not give themselves for this country. They would not die for this country, let alone take a wound of some kind, of any kind. This is the guy who created that, because he understood the importance of people giving their lives for the principles and ideals that they fought for. All right, our country. George Washington. All right, let me wrap up here. Patriotic groups, Boy Scouts of America also held celebrations on the day, 1938. 5,000 people attended Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City in honor of Washington. In its modern form, President's Day is used by many patriotic and historical groups as a date for staging celebrations. There's plenty of celebrations that you can go to throughout, the country today. If you did so, congratulations, and I applaud you for doing so. Reenactments, Civil War reenactments, and that goes on anyway, but there's just a lot of cool stuff done to remember the first president, if not all the presidents, and Lincoln for sure. A number of states also required that the public schools spend the days leading up to President's Day teaching students. And this one I kind of like, near and dear to my heart. I'm going to repeat that. A number of states also required that their public schools, remember public, private or separate, but public schools, spend the days leading up to President's Day teaching students about the accomplishments of the presidents, often with the focus on the lives of Washington and Lincoln. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why I'm doing tonight, because growing up, I remember those. I remember the teachers that spent more than a day or two talking about Washington and Lincoln in particular, and coming up with cool, creative ways to keep little minds invested and intrigued with what we were doing, or what our country was doing when it was founded. So I know, like, in particular, there are some, it's called, now it's like interactive learning, but it's also cross-subject training, treatment of a topic. You get President's Day and you talk about, okay, historically, these are the things that happened. You talk about, artistically, we're going to have you create Washington's hat, or you're going to paint a picture of George Washington out of the battlefield. So they include different subjects: math, science, history, art, different subjects in the educational framework, and they move it and make it go all together with this topic that is President's Day. So it's all things presidents, done from the perspective of, hey, this is what we're going to use to teach these little guys. We're going to make you talk about George Washington crossing the Delaware. We're going to talk about the history. We're going to talk about the physical. We're going to talk about what it looked like. You're going to paint a picture. We're going to play some music. Just really cool stuff. Teachers get creative. I remember President's Day, Washington and Lincoln, because of the creative things that my teachers, especially in elementary, it gets a little harder when you're in high school. It's not as creative, right? It's a little lazier. High school teachers are going to jump on me for that one. But the cool stuff that I remember out of elementary that some of my teachers did to get me interested in President's Day is quite literally the genesis for why I'm doing a special tonight on just the presidents. For some of my teacher friends out there, and there are a lot of you, I got a lot of teacher friends, none but love for you if you're still doing that, if you're still doing cross-curricular, cross-subject approaches to teaching our kids the importance of our presidents and the leadership that we've had in the past. None but love for you. Okay, so just about wrapped up there, but I've given you the particulars on the days, the genesis of the holiday, the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, how in general it's supposed to be for all presidents, but as I grew up, and maybe some of you did, it was about Lincoln and Washington, and quite literally the major genesis of it all was Washington in particular, and all the presidents that came after. So we're going to wrap up, this night with a little bit, on my end from why I still feel that way. Obviously, I was taught that way, so some good teachers taught me that, and that's why I quite literally remember, and I frame my view of President's Day from that perspective of what I was taught when I was in the classroom, or as a student. Maybe teachers do it differently now. I don't know. I'm not that engaged anymore, even though I probably should be. So I don't know. And my kids are, all out of high school and out of the K-12 system. So I don't even, I don't necessarily think about it anymore, but I'm putting it out there because even if teachers don't do that, I'm letting you know, Joe and Jane America, that you should do that you should also be an active component, an active participator, if not an active prime mover in your child's education. And in this particular case, today, on President's Day, the third Monday of February, I think it's important that you teach your kids about the presidents that we've had in the past, and definitely those two in particular. I will get off my soapbox for a second here, but it is important that you become, as an adult, an active, again, participant, an active player, an active mover in your child's education. Because I've heard this a bunch of times, and I won't get too far on the negative black end here, but I hear people complaining a lot about education. Hell, I complain about it too, by the way. But you got no business complaining if you're not willing to do something about it. If you're not willing to actively move and take action to help correct it. Now, I'm not saying go and change the whole system, although I'd like to say that. There's some things about it we need to change. What I'm saying is it starts in the home. And I think we all know those words, correct? We absolutely do. We should. It does start in the home. If you start in the home and they don't care about the presidency and Washington and Lincoln, then how can you expect that child to actively engage and learn that and retain that information so that it stays with them in my current form? And trust me, I'm no saint, I'm not perfect, but it is strong here with me when it comes to Washington and Lincoln, because that's what I was taught. And that's what I was reinforced by a grandfather and a father and a mother. My grandfather in particular, one of them, was heavy with me on knowing our history, knowing how we began, knowing the things that these people have done, not just the presidents but others, knowing the things that they have done to give us the ability to live in the greatest country the world has ever seen. Become an active participant, become an active player. Even if you have kids out of the system, talk openly about it. Talk openly about the significance of these two guys. At least, if not today, then just in general. So let me wrap that up. That's a little bit of a soapbox. I'm telling you to be an active player. Education starts in the home. Okay, it's not just in the public school system. It's not just, hey, take my taxes and teach my kids. Hell no. You take my taxes, you teach my kids, but I'm going to teach my kids too, at the base and at the core, so that what they get in schools is almost supplementary to the base of education and a core fundamental principle of values and principles that I'm giving my children. That's how I did it. Maybe I end up wrong, maybe they're not that good, so be it. But I know that I've actually tried, and I've done that because I won't rely on others to parent or raise good Americans for me. Not doing that. Okay, last bit before I cut. So check this out. Two guys, Washington and Lincoln. Gold standard, Mount Rushmore. Let me see, watch. So let me see. All right, right now, as you're viewing the screen, there's my dog. How do I do that? So I'm maneuvering. There's my dog, Washington. There you go. Over my right shoulder, and just over my left. Get that a little lower. Just over my left, there's my dog Lincoln. Oh, that worked out all right. Okay, P. That worked out all right. Okay, so there's my dog Washington. There's my dog Lincoln. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to treat them in two words. Generally speaking, they're generally considered number one and number two. Depending on your particular proclivity or where you feel, what you believe, what you've heard, what you were taught, they're interchangeable. One can be one here, one can be two there. or vice versa, depending on what your, again, your proclivities, your beliefs, your intent, your thoughts, and what you feel about the two particular presidents, right? So I'm going to give you the A-list case for either gentleman. Either gentleman. I'm probably over time, and I'm just going to give you full disclosure on the SuperMex side. They've been interchangeable for me. They're interchangeable, one or two. It doesn't matter to me. But I'm leaning a little more over my lifetime toward the first. Toward this gentleman over there. I get the camera right. Okay. And by a hair, by a smidge, right? Okay, but this one I'm going to give you for Lincoln. Lincoln held this country together. Lincoln saved us from the most critical potential split and potential devolution of our country in our nation's history. In our nation's history. At the single most critical point in the history of our country, short of the founding, we'll get in, there's foreshadowing, short of the founding, Lincoln, if not him, then who? If not for him, then who? If not for Lincoln, we may not be in existence in the current form. There might be a Confederate States of the South, the United States of the North. That is very, very probable, if not possible. That was very real. That was the thought and the intent. And so I won't go too far because it'll be an entirely different history lesson, but let's make sure we're clear here. Revisionist historians would like to tell you that, meaning go back, change it to make it look better for you, or change it to suit your views. It was fought over states' rights. I've heard both. Some people say it was fought over slavery. Some people say it was states' rights. It's both. It's both. As a matter of fact, one springs from the other. The way of life of the South and the nature of slavery as an economic portion system, as an economic system in general, was part of states' rights. The ability for a state to choose how it exists, how it operates, and how it administers its government. Slavery was a part of that. We believe in slavery as part of our economy. It is our right to do so. United States government, you cannot tell me how to administer or govern my state. That is states' rights. So it's both. All right, so let's make sure we're clearing that up. People with an ulterior agenda like to skew it one way or the other. Left or right, I don't give a damn. It's both. They're both intertwined, they're both mixed. And they became one and the same as it came to a head. So someone telling you that, no, the war wasn't fought over slavery, it was fought over states' rights. That's partially true, but not the entire truth. Someone telling you that the war was fought over slavery and not states' rights is partially true and not entirely true. It was both, and they were both intertwined. I refer you to more history, study, etc. Watch some good clips, watch some good documentaries. It's too long here. My point being, Lincoln was the right man at the right time then to hold this country together and not watch us devolve into two separate and distinct entities. And the truth is, if we had, in our youth of not quite 100 years, we may not have survived. There were far greater powers in other portions of the world that might have been able to gobble us up, or maybe we wouldn't have grown in the same fashion because we were separate, and we wouldn't have been able to put together the might and the economy and the military in the same fashion. Okay? So I'm going to drop it there, and then I'm going to move to the next gentleman. But if not for Lincoln, this country would not exist in its current form. That's a fact. There are no alternative facts here. There are no fake news attacks or attempts here. That is a fact. We would not exist in the same form if not for Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president. And for that, he is on Mount Rushmore. And for a bunch of other things, but quite literally, he is on Mount Rushmore. So, number one, the other gentleman, for all the reasons that I've named and enumerated for you about Abe Lincoln, I hold to you. You can easily ascribe the other and same caliber quality to George Washington. Same situation. If there is no George Washington, there is no us. You like that? This Is Us, just not that show. I don't watch it. You guys maybe do. If there is no George Washington, there is no United States. And I can make that statement. I can make that statement directly. There was no commander of his caliber and his strategic sense, if not technical and tactical proficiency. We had no one like him. He was it. He was it. If he doesn't fight that revolution, and I'm not talking, don't get me wrong, there was other, okay? There was a Continental Congress later. There were people that got together, these representatives from all these 13, these colonies, right? And they sat down, and they're important too, each of them. And maybe they wouldn't exist if we didn't have some of them. Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, etc. I can go on and on. But I'm going to speak in specific and in particular as I wrap up the evening tonight. George Washington was singularly unique in our nation's history. There was no one else like him, and we couldn't have found anyone like him. If he wasn't there, we don't exist, because we would not have won that war, and we would not exist as a country. We would have devolved back to monarchy and autocracy. Insert joke later as we devolve. That's what we would have been. We would still be a British Canada or Australia or something else. And maybe it wouldn't be bad, I don't know. But what I do know is that with certainty and specificity, without Washington, we don't win that war, ladies and gentlemen. And if we don't win that war, we don't have a country. One interesting sidebar that I'm going to throw at you, why I think he is the gold standard. He's the greatest president we've ever had. And apropos of the moment, okay? Read into that. If you have to go back and look it up and understand, try to understand the nuance I'm serving to you here on a nice silver, not gold platter. King George, the king we rebelled and revolted against, the guy that was taxing the hell out of us, using us, our country, and taking us for granted as his subjects, taxing the hell out of us, taxation without representation. We didn't have any say. He just did what he wanted, and we had to abide and follow because he's the king. Quite literally the reason why we fought the war, and quite literally the reason why we have a country today. His statement, and I was reminded because I watched something the other day, and I remember this because I remember reading this, studying this. King George basically stated that after the war was over and Washington had delivered us the victory and gained us our freedom, our liberty, our pursuit of happiness, all of the above, later on to come with the Constitution, okay, and a Madison that created it. When all that was over and done, and we had won our freedom, we had won our liberty, we had won our liberty, King George stated that if George Washington, after delivering on the goods, being president for 2 terms, the first, if he were just to turn all that away and go back home to Mount Vernon and hand over power that he had gained in his role as our first commander-in-chief and then as president, then he, sir, would be the greatest man on the planet and the greatest American ever. I submit that to you for tonight's listening pleasure. He did that. He had the ability to do whatever the hell he wanted to. And as president, he tried to do some things, and he was rebuffed, and he worked with, even though grudgingly sometimes he did not want to, with the Congress, and abided by our courts and our laws. A bona fide, and for those children listening today, I apologize. Adults, please don't let them listen, but he was a bona fide American badass. Quite literally the first. And he gave it all up to go back home to the farm, the ranch, and give up power. King George, the reason why we rebelled, revolted, and started this country, stated that if he did that, then he, sir, would be the greatest man on the planet. He was back then, and even though there's a lot of good ones in between, and I'm not saying who the best all time is, I'm not doing that, but he was at that time, in that history, in that space, what it was, where slavery was commonplace, where autocracy and no rule of law were commonplace, dictatorship, monarchy, commonplace. At a time, could you imagine the massive ability in ego to willingly cede and give away your power? That is badass to me. That is absolutely all-American to me. That is why, with the close second, I love me some Kennedy. I love me, Franklin D. I love Teddy Roosevelt. I can name a whole bunch of good presidents. But he is the gold standard because he gave us this constitutional democracy republic. He gave it to us. Not just because he won a war for us, but because when he had all that power and could have done more, including go on and go on and go on, and basically made him a king in all but name, because he could have continued to serve. He chose not to. He said, 2 terms, I'm out of here, get some new people in, get some new blood. That's incredible. That's absolutely astounding to me as an historian, and most importantly, as a veteran, as an American. He's my number one. That's my show for you tonight. Thank you for being with me on President's Day. Hope you feel and empathize with me a little bit. That's feel-good stuff, man. I mean, it really is. Okay? So that's my show tonight. Quick programming note. So I'm headed, that's going to be fun. I'm heading to Boston to visit some family, a son in particular, for a little bit. I will most likely not be on air by Friday. Hopefully by Sunday, if not me, then the SuperMex Nation Roundtable, because the programming is increasing. We're bringing you more shows now, and there will be more throughout the week. So I won't be back at least until this coming next week, where I hope to pick up and begin, a whole slew of original programming, in addition to the usual cheap date night on Fridays. I take that back. Let me back that up 1 second before I go. There may be a cheap date night on Friday. I won't give you all the particulars. If I do, it'll be special because I'll be in location somewhere in another part of the country. I'm working on that now. I'll let you know. If not, there will most likely be a Sunday show, not political, maybe cultural, but SuperMex Nation on Sunday with some of my good friends that are holding the fort down while I'm out. And then I'll definitely be back by early next week, and we're going to start hitting it hard. A couple shows, 2-3 shows a week maybe. If not mine, then other good people that are bringing you good material, like tonight, like what we did tonight. I hope you learned something tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. Those are facts, figures, information, the nuts and bolts of history and President's Day 2020. Again, he's my number one. I would say, go back over that or rewind that and internalize that in your head. The significance of who that guy was and what he did. We wouldn't be here. And I wouldn't be on air, this little brown guy talking to you on air right now, if it weren't for George Washington. That's my show tonight. You guys enjoy. I will see you sometime in the coming week. Thank you very much. SuperMex Nation is out.